Okay, I'm Ross here at FlexPoint Off-Road. Today I'm doing Toyota 3.0 timing belt. Show you a quick how-to on how to do this, make it really easy for you. I've been doing this in business over 15 years. This is something I do quite often. So instead of showing you how to take every nut and bolt off the whole thing, let's just focus today on the timing belt. Now, I've already done the water pump. That's something I'm sure you can figure out how to do. A lot of videos about how to do it. And I already did the crankshaft front oil seal. For you, those of you that don't know what it is, back behind there is the front crankshaft oil seal. So that's something you do want to do. So get that thing done first before you put this all together, especially if you have high miles on the motor. This engine, I can clearly see, already had a top end on it once upon a time. Hence, as you can see, clean cylinder head, dirty stuff down here. Now, a few tips and tricks on how to do this thing. You can leave the power steering pump on. The only thing you got to take off is there's a front bracket right here. Air conditioner, same thing. Do not touch it, leave it on there. I've already also done this pulley right here, you know, on the water neck right there. You have to take this back plate off in order to do it. Now let's jump in here. I got to button this guy down. Also, if you got high mileage, do your cam seals too. These ones were just done. I'm not even going to touch them. They're really fresh. Customer came in, they had a leaking oil pump. So I like to use the Asen water pumps right there. So do yourself a favor, buy a good water pump. Now let's jump in here, get this thing done. I'm going to quickly throw the rest of these guys on really quick. No need to fancy talk about this. There's nothing to this piece. You just screw them in. We'll buzz them on with our impact gun. Let's see here. I think that should be all of them. That's what it looks like to me. So, one of my favorite tools to use right here. Snap-on impact gun, 3/8. Super quick, super easy. And then there's a back plate that goes on as well. So you do want to stick that guy on there. This just kind of tucks in the back. Easier said than done. There we go. Just like that. And you want to make sure to rotate this over, because I have had these be bent and rub on the back. Okay, now back plate's on. Cam sprockets. I gotta zip these guys on. Now the thing is about these cam gears, they are kind of spring loaded. If you do rotate it past, you know, where it wants to, like I'll show you right here, like if you just kind of see how it kind of flung back, and see how right there it's past. As soon as you let it go, it's too fast, too far past. Don't worry about that. You just kind of, where's our marks right here. So you're just going to kind of rotate it, and then you can feel when it's getting ready to go past. And then right there is right where we want to hold it. So it's kind of in between wanting to flop back this way so don't worry about it too much. Now, a couple quick things. I'm going to make some marks. There's already some marks there, but this is just for you guys to see what's going to be happening right there. Now, an important thing to remember, what we are trying to achieve here is there's a little dimple right there from the factory, and there's a line right there on that cam gear. We want to make sure that this lines up here, same going on here, and then down here on the crankshaft. So there's actually an indentation on that sprocket, and then there's a little groove right there on the top of your oil pump casting. Very important, you want to get that lined up. Now, what we want to do is we want to have all the tension across the top, all the way down the driver's side, and then the slack, there's going to be a tensioner that goes on over here on the passenger side. That's going to be our last step. So let's get in there. I'm going to show you what I do. I really like this zip tie method. It kind of helps me to grab everything, put it on without having issues, because I get a lot of customers that come in, they just did their timing belt, the truck doesn't start, or the 4Runner doesn't start, depending on which motor you have it in. Real common problem. Other thing too is the distributor's out of tooth quite often. Now, when you're doing this timing belt job, if your distributor's already in, leave it in, don't touch it. I'll do another video about how to re-stab the distributor in if you've lost timing, and how to go over about that. If you want, let me know in the comments section below. So we are going to be starting right here. We're going to put the timing belt right here on this passenger sprocket, and then we're going to work our way over to the driver. We're going to go down and around the water pump, and then we're going to go right around the crankshaft, and then we're going to leave all the slack right here. So this is going to be a little bit interesting, because you are going to notice, let's see here, so also a lot of timing belts, they will come and they will have some grooves, some marks put on them. Sometimes these are in the right spot, sometimes they're not. So sometimes they're on the right spot, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's trial and error. But even if you don't have the marks on there, do not worry about it. It's totally not the end of the world. And then I'll make a note. So this is how we would be viewing it. So this would be like one of the crankshaft marks, this would be the other one. And then down below on the bottom, there's a mark right here. There's another mark actually down underneath the bottom of this. There's gonna be, I can't see it in the camera, but there should be a dot down here. That's where you would align that thing to. I am going to take a quick look at it really quick, see if I can make that mark for you guys. Yep, there's already a mark. So I'm gonna go ahead, it's already marked in white, but we're gonna go put the red on there. That way you guys can clearly see that's where that bottom line, that's where that bottom line is going to end up going. So, but the main thing is we're concerned about this mark right there. That's really what we want to see when we go ahead and rotate this thing over, spin everything over. Okay, so normally I like to put, when I do belts, serpentine belts, I like the letters facing towards me. But what I find is when they print these things, most of the time, the lettering's backwards. So you just gotta deal with it. Okay, so go ahead and we're gonna stuff this thing on here. We're gonna use our best friend, Mr. Zip Tie, right here. Let's see if I can get this back in there. Such quality zip ties right there. Flush cut that. Okay, Okay, so what we did right there is we lined the mark right onto the mark there. And then you're also going to notice kind of too, this mark is just slightly off. I will get in on how to deal with that in a minute. So next thing, we're going to go stretch all the way across. So we're going to show you something right here. You're going to notice how, oh, this one actually cooperated. Every once in a while, these marks, the belt will be like a little extra tight depending on your weather. Like if it's super cold, that mark will have a harder time lining up. If that's the case, I'm going to show you how we're going to do it down here on the crankshaft, because that'll compensate for the same thing we're trying to do up here. So sometimes we have to actually roll one of these bolt heads a little bit back or forth, and then roll it back and then grab our tension. So again, we're going to pop a zip tie on there. We're going to flush cut that off. Our Matco flush cutters right there. I don't want to get stitches. So, okay, so we got one. Step 2. Step 3 is going to be wrapping this guy all the way around. And what we're going to do too is we are going to go right to the front side of this, and we're going to also make a mark, even though there's a mark right here. This is going to allow us to actually see the mark a little bit easier to line it up on the sprocket down there. Okay, so let's go put this guy around there. Now what we're going to have to do is, this is the crankshaft bolt. There's a reason we're getting this out. So down here, we're going to actually feed this guy. We're just going to zip this guy on real quick. This is like probably the most important part right here. It's going to save you a ton of time, because so many people, they'll try to pull on these belts, they'll try to stretch these belts to get them to line up, and we're not doing that. They're going to pull this whole thing, and it's just going to rotate all the gears over. You don't want to do that. So what we're going to be doing here is we're actually going to rotate that crankshaft bolt by hand. We're going to rotate the crankshaft and give it a little bit of slack. So by doing that, we're going to go counterclockwise, and that's actually going to rotate the gear enough to where the tooth's a little bit closer to the mark on the belt. And then we're going to line that up right there, and I'm going to hold it by my hand, and then with the other hand I'm going to take my ratchet and I'm going to rotate it tight enough just to get everything snug, but not tight enough to actually roll the crankshaft gears. If it happens to you, don't worry about it. We just got to reset everything, cut the zip tie, start over. It's really easy. All right, so I'm going to go look from underneath, so I can't quite tell what the mark is. So I want you guys to see this. So by pulling this belt, we can only pull it so far. And the problem is, as you can see how the teeth are kind of a little bit off? So by rotating this crankshaft bolt, I got to hit it with the impact for a second really carefully, but we're going to actually rotate this counterclockwise a little bit. That's going to bring the red dot on this sprocket a little bit closer to this red dot right there. So we're going to line those two pieces up, and then I'm going to grab the belt, squeeze it together just to hold tension, and then I'm going to rotate this bolt back clockwise to get it back down to where it's supposed to be. Okay, so slug this dude a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to just rotate this a little bit counterclockwise. So I'm gonna try to show you guys this thing. So see now how I got those two bottom marks lined up right there? And then see there's still some slack here, so we got to get rid of this. We got to keep it tight, 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 and tight, and this is where the looseness is going to be. So we're actually going to go right back to where it was. There. Now, just for purposes of showing you what I did right there, and this is going to be a real temporary zip tie right here. This is just to hold this long enough. There's a pulley, tensioner pulley we have to put on. So this is just to hold these two pieces from rolling off. That one wasn't quite on there right. Okay. So now I haven't done a bunch of tension on this. That'll be the next step, but it's tight here. It's tight there. You know, it can move a little bit here, but we're gonna stretch this in a second. And then it's tight here. So all of our slack, as you can see how this really moves? But we're all lined up down there. So see how the two paint marks are together. Crankshaft sprocket, and then we got that line that was on down the timing belt. Next step, this is going to be a little bit of the tricky part. This is the tensioner. So let me show you how we're going to do this. I always use brand new bearings anytime I do these. Now this is important. So this is our tensioner. There's a couple things you have to have on here. So you're going to transfer this bolt from the other guy. I like to put a little bit of lube. It doesn't matter what you got. So we just got a little bit of red grease. This washer, this is super important. This has to go on the back side that actually attaches to the cylinder head. Otherwise this thing will not pivot. Now this piece is a little bit of a pain to put it on there, and also you need a size 10, you know, little hex key in there, because this is, you know, Allen head type bolt to go in there. This guy is going to go underneath the bottom like this, but it's going to go in through this bolt head. So in order to do that, we have to cut this zip tie off right here, and I'm going to be holding my slack on there. So sometimes this thing's, like I said, it's a little bit tricky. You got to kind of like act like you have an octopus hand or something like that, you know, like this one's actually seems to be cooperating today. Now I'm keeping slack pushed in from the back side of this. Now don't worry about it being super tight right away, but just hold the slack. I'm gonna go and stick another zip tie down the back side down here to hold it, because if I go and let this thing go before we got the tensioner on there, it could do some weird stuff. Okay, so that's good enough. So let's give you guys a rundown. So we started here, out of the driver, all the way down here to the crankshaft, and now we got this tensioner bearing right here, and then we got this guy. Something to keep in mind about this: when we are done, that bolt's only going to go to like 20 foot-pounds. So you do not suck it super tight. It's got to be snug enough to just not back itself out, but it's got to have a little bit of play, so that way as that tensioner's rocking, as it's adjusting the timing belt, it just won't sit there and fall off, you know, or be too tight to where it just like puts too much tension on the back side of this rubber belt. You don't want to burn it up. So that's the thing. So next step we have, let's go down here to the floor. So this is a little cover that goes on for part of the pulleys. That's the hydraulic tensioner. Some kits will come with a tensioner, some don't. This one right here, customer opted to just reuse it. A lot of times these are still pretty good. We will know when we go and check it. Set this here. And what I mean by checking it is how we're going to do that is we are going to actually install this thing. After we install it, we're going to go and make sure, we're going to rotate the belt twice over and make sure all the lines still line up. Now, if the tensioner is not actually holding that belt in there with this hydraulic unit right here, we will replace this. So now I'm going to show you how we actually go and use this little pin right here, and there's a hole. So let me move this little rubber seal. So what we're going to be doing here, we are going to compress this in the vise. There's a hole right there, and there's a hole right there. We're going to actually be getting this to insert and drop down through that hole right there. Good enough. So sometimes these things are a little bit picky, sometimes they work out pretty good. And what I find is you just can't just reef on this thing and just get it done super fast. You just got to kind of like go a little bit and let it sit. Then you can squeeze it a little bit more. And then I'm going to start this in the case, the hole in the case. And then after we get it compressed, it should just line up. Doesn't always work that easy. Okay, so now what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to cut this zip tie. At the same time, use our finger, press this tensioner pulley up that way, and then this case will be able to then slip forward. Sometimes easier said than done, so. Okay, now as you can see how much room we got there between the two belts after cutting that dude off. Now what we got to do is we got to take this guy, and there's a hole right there. So we got to get this thing shove it in there just like that. All right, these are the bolts. Kind of a little awkward with the power steering pulley there, but okay. So I'm going to do the other bolt. So we got to do one more step before we go and release this pin. This is like the most important step for this whole thing. Because remember, we got to keep it tight all the way here down, and we only want the slack right here. If we have slack somewhere else, we got to redo this thing. Let's see here. Now it's like, yeah, we could use a little ratchet to get this thing in there, but this is one of those pairs of bolts where I want to make sure I can feel what's happening, because this is one of those guys you don't want to snap anything off in. Okay, so find my ratchet. One for the crankshaft. This right here. Now we're going to be getting to the most important stage right here. So we have to basically preload this belt. How we're going to do that is we're going to use this socket, the ratchet, with the socket attached. We're going to actually barely put a little bit of tension down on the crankshaft. We're going to rotate it just a little bit clockwise. That way we can load all the tension on the belt and pull everything towards the driver's side and down. And we're going to do that without trying to spin everything around all over. We're just going to pull some tension on there. After that, we're then going to pull the pin on the hydraulic tension and release everything. And we're going to let it sit for a few minutes. And then I'm going to show you what we're going to do. Okay, so before we go and do that, I want to make sure it's tight here, tight here, tight here. It is. tight down here at the bottom, and then see we got some slack right here down on this side. That's what we want to see. And again, we got our 3 points here, here, and down here lined up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut our belts. At the same time, before I cut that last one, I'm going to just slightly, let's see, I just barely did it. Let's pull this guy. Now I'm going to pull this pin right here. It's kind of like pulling the pin out of the hand grenade. And now what we're going to do is we're going to check this twice. So we're going to go all the way around. Truck's still in gear, so let me take it out of gear. Okay, so we got to be in neutral in the transmission because I was trying to roll everything. And if you got good compression, you know, it should be a little bit of resistance on rotating it around. But if you feel something bind up and it just doesn't want to move, do not force it. You probably got a tooth off or something. You do not want a valve sitting there hitting the piston top. So this feels completely normal so far. Let's get right to about there. So I did one full revelation. We're still lined up dot to dot. If we go over here, we are also dot to dot. Now, something to keep in mind, these lines on the timing belt, they are consistently going to move. They're never going to line right back up every time on those marks where we put them. So disregard that. It's totally normal to see that. Now we want to look down at the bottom. We want to make sure down at the bottom we are lined up before we say this is good. And then I know that's straight up and down. I'm going to have to look in there really quick, but we want to make sure that that mark up in there and that dot is exactly lined up. So let me do that because I can't see it with the camera. Super epic. Here's what we're going to do. Pulling that bolt off here for a reason. I'm going to show you guys something. We're going to take the lower plastic timing gear. You're going to see there's marks on there. 0 is what we want to pay attention to. So let me slip this down here on the bottom. Oh, before I do that, there's a ring that's got to go on. Now this ring, it's got a beveled edge to it. It's slightly concaves on one side. That's what we want to have face out towards the front of the truck. We don't want the bevel facing in towards the belt. So we're going to take this guy. This gets slipped down on the bottom, just like so. And that's also going to help the belt from trying not to walk off the front. So now I'm going to take this dude right here. Get that guy lined up down there. should have had this on before I put this on there, but trying to show you guys the belt alignment down there. It's not quite right. And there should be one down right here. Right there. I'm going to take the harmonic balancer right here, and there's going to be a little paint mark there. I'm just going to highlight that paint mark in red, and then for the heck of it, stick one right on 0 down there too. And I'm going to slip this guy in here. So now that I got the balancer on, you can see we are aligned right at 0. We are aligned right here, and we're aligned on this cam gear. Now I like to do it a second time. I'm going to rotate around everything again. I'm going to make sure everything is where it's supposed to be before I go and put this cover on. So I want you guys to understand that this timing belt procedure, it is the same exact for the Toyota 5EZ 3.4, which is going to be in your Tacomas, some of the T100s, and the 4Runners, 95.5 up to 04. The only difference is on the sprocket down on the bottom of the crankshaft, there's going to be some teeth on there. You want to make sure you do not drop that gear and damage one of those teeth, otherwise the crankshaft position sensor will not pick up right. It won't start the truck, or even if it does, which shouldn't happen, it's going to run really poor. The other thing is on the Tacomas 3.4, you're going to have another little tab that comes out, because there's going to be a cam position sensor switch that comes up with the wiring up from behind, and it's going to read that little tang too. That's how it's going to sync everything up. So if this thing goes and we rotate it again, it checks out, it is totally good. I'm going to put the cover back on there, put everything back on, put fluids in it, we're going to fire it up, it's going to run great. Okay, so I spun everything around, everything is good. It's all back together right here. I still have not started this thing up. Got to put the coolant in there, but first I got a seal that is sealing up the top thermostat, little water neck thing, before I torque that thing down. I like to let the silicone sit for an hour. But if you have questions, ask them in the comments. You guys want certain videos about Toyotas, how to repair something, you know, just let me know. I'd be happy to help you out. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.